Hello, my name is Jaru. Today I'm talking about Deltarune. There will be major spoilers for both Deltarune and Undertale, so please play them both before watching this. Today I've got a pretty gnarly theory for you. I will be attempting to answer a question that has been bothering me ever since I started analyzing Deltarune. I will be providing what I think is the solution to the mystery of monster blood. Not only will this theory be fascinating in its own right, not only will it solve some of the issues with my other theories, but it will also spoil you on yet another horrific plot twist that I believe Toby Fox has in store for us. And also, as a side note, it will also be explaining a sizable chunk of Sans' backstory. However, before we can get to all that, we've got some new fan art to look at. First up is this meme edit of my last video's thumbnail, in which everything has been gasterfied for maximum clickbait potential, and I cannot express how freaking funny I find this image. The text edits, the face edits, especially the Chad Gaster or Chadster in the bottom right and the Greenster in the middle are all just so freaking funny. The longer you stare at this, the more hilarity can be found, and I absolutely adore it. Thank you so much for making this. Next up is this awesome banner that someone made for my YouTube channel, which you may not have noticed I am now using. This is really cool and stylish and really well made, and I just greatly appreciate it. From this same artist also came these awesome pieces. They took my Ganondorf icon and reimagined it in Deltarune's art style. How cool is that? We've got different expressions too, including happy, surprised, neutral, and radical. I love it. Thank you so much for sharing this with me. Next is another depiction of Chris stabbing Asriel, because we have to have at least one of those per video, and I really love this one. The art style is really cool. I love how insane Chris's horns look, and the dusty powder radiating from Asriel is a nice touch. You can also spot details in the background hinting at things in Ralsei's Dark World, including the eye puzzle. Really great piece. Thank you very much. Next is this awesome piece. I mean, just look at this. We've got the Fun Gang all looking fly. Chris once again is rocking that bronze armor and Chad jawline, and they're all doing battle with a gargantuan Oberon Smog. The creative choices made with Oberon here are awesome. The orange and brown splotchy skin is a really nice touch. He has this crazy armored mouthpiece going on. His armor has this rad, multi-layered and colorful design that is very cool, and I think he might even have a pink cape billowing in the background, which is awesome on its own, but it's even cooler when you consider that I personally suspect Oberon will have long pink hair. So that's awesome. Fantastic piece overall. Thank you so much for sharing your work with us, and I hope to see more of your art in the future. Next is this really gorgeous piece of Chris realizing their horrible mistake after stabbing Asriel, and holy cow is this art style incredible! It has this chalk-like aesthetic that just makes the scene look so stark and artistic, with the white and black dominating the scene and the lighting, which makes the red and green of Chris's costume pop all the more. This is an absolutely incredible piece. I adore your art style, and I hope you know that you are extremely talented. Next is an Oberon smog depiction that I actually missed a month ago, so I'm very sorry I took so long to discuss it. We've got a great Oberon smog depiction, with this version rocking the classic blue color scheme that was first introduced way back when with the first Oberon sprite sheet. And also from that sheet is Oberon's awesome chain whip. It's very cool to see such a high resolution depiction of that version of Oberon. So thank you very much for sharing this with us. They also included a really cool rendition of the Twisted Sword and an even cooler original idea for a sword that the artist says is inspired by the event of Chris stabbing Azrael, with this sword reflecting Azrael, Flowey, and Chris all at once. Very creative and intense design. I love it. Thank you so much for sharing this with me, and I'm sorry, once again, that I took so long to notice it. Last, but certainly not least, is this absolutely gorgeous piece. Holy cow, where do I even start with this? The leaves circling the picture are absolutely beautiful, as well as being absurdly detailed. In fact, the castle in the background is also incredibly well detailed. Actually, this whole picture has ridiculous amounts of detail. This is incredible. Susie and Chris look cool as hell, and Ralsei looks absolutely adorable. I do not have sufficient words to express how incredible this art piece is. You are insanely talented to be able to make something like this, and I am humbled and honored to have been blessed with such gorgeous art. You are marvelous. Thank you so much for sharing this with us all. That's all the art for today, and let me just thank all the talented artists who share their incredible work with us. You guys make doing these videos so much more worth it than it could ever be otherwise. It's an honor beyond compare, and the idea of me inspiring such wonderful works of art makes me feel like I'm actually doing something worthwhile with this channel. You are all wonderful. I am blessed beyond measure. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And with all that art now discussed, let's get to my theory. First, some backstory. When I first started making theories about Deltarune, I started with this video. In this video, I concluded that Deltarune exists in an alternate timeline and is not an alternate reality. I further concluded that some major event drastically altered the Deltarune timeline to cause it to end up so different from Undertale. Then came this video, in which I discussed what I believed the major event that caused this divergence actually was. There were 4 conclusions in this video that are relevant for today's theory. 1. During the war between humans and monsters, a monster successfully acquired 7 human souls and became a god. This entity became known as the Angel. 2. The Angel determined that monsters having magic was what caused the war, as that's what made the humans afraid of them. As such, the Angel took away all the magic from the world and sealed it in another dimension, which came to be known as the Dark World. 3. The Angel then altered everyone's memory in order to make them think that magic never existed. This ensured that there would be no more wars between humans and monsters. 4. The Angel has trapped this reality in a time loop so that if the roaring ever takes place and magic returns to the world, then the Angel will be able to reset the timeline back to how it was before the roaring occurred, while also resetting everyone's memories in the process. As you can see, these two videos go hand in hand. One establishes the nature of Deltarune's reality, while the other discusses the specific circumstances necessary to cause Deltarune to become the way it is. Overall, I'm quite pleased with my logic in these videos. However, there has been one hole in this theory that has plagued me more than any other. One problem with this entire conclusion that even I have struggled to rationalize. And that problem manifested itself with one specific line. Everybody bleeds, right? This has proven to be the biggest hurdle for me in justifying my theory. Why is this such a big problem? Because Undertale monsters don't bleed. Monsters in Undertale have bodies made entirely of magic. They don't have flesh or bones or blood. That's why they disintegrate when they die. That's why they don't bleed when you cut them. As such, if Susie, a monster, is claiming that everybody bleeds in Deltarune, then that seems to pretty strongly suggest that there's something fundamentally different about this reality, and that it's not just an alternate timeline. Naturally, I've done my best to try and dismiss this line. I argued that Susie was ignorant of basic biology and that she just doesn't know what she's talking about, even though there's no way that Susie is that ignorant. I also argued that this infant rabbit somehow knows more about monster biology than Susie. Trying to insist that Susie is this ignorant feels almost laughable in retrospect, but still, I held on to my theory in spite of this issue because it still made a lot of sense. But then, people digging in the code found something terrible. An unused sprite of Susie bleeding. This sprite was supposed to be used in the scene where Susie falls off this garbage pile and Rouse heals her. This sprite is clearly important. Toby Fox would not make this sprite if monsters don't have blood. He's not just going to forget a basic fact about the core species of this setting. This was clearly Toby Fox trying to hint at the fact that monsters have blood. And yet, once again, I tried to rationalize this away. At the time, I argued that since this sprite was never actually used in the game, that makes it non-canon. After all, we in the Undertale community have never used stuff that only exists in the code as canon evidence, right? Needless to say, I was in denial. I just couldn't reconcile monsters having blood with my theories about this world. I ended up just trying to not think about it, which was really stupid because now that I've actually given it some thought, I realize that this problem with monster blood is not a problem at all. You see, I found a way to explain monsters having blood in such a way that it fits in my other theories. The solution was laughably simple, actually. My theory held that the angel took away the monster's magic, right? And monsters have bodies made of magic, right? Well, if the angel really did take away their magic, then wouldn't monsters cease to exist? That wouldn't work. The angel wants to protect monsters, not destroy them. So, the evolution of my theory is this. The angel took away the magical bodies of monsters and, using its infinite godlike power, granted them new, non-magical bodies to use instead. The humans had always been superior to monsters thanks to their physical bodies, right? Well, if the magic was going away, then it was only fair that the angel level the playing field and give monsters physical bodies too. And what is probably the best part about this new addition to my theory is that it even explains why the Queen considered both monsters and humans as being capable of wielding substantial quantities of determination. In Undertale, the reason monsters couldn't handle large amounts of determination was because of their magical bodies. It wasn't that their souls were too weak, but that their bodies were too weak, due to them being made of magic instead of matter. By contrast, the Deltarune monsters have new physical bodies now, which allows them to contain enough determination to create dark fountains. Shout out to Mystic Slime, by the way. It was while watching their video on Deltarune Souls that I realized that monsters having a large amount of determination in Deltarune actually supported my theory. And that's actually it. That's the whole evolution to my theory. Monsters have physical bodies in Deltarune because of the angel, which is why they have blood and why they can handle determination. Of course, this might seem to conflict with my Ralsei and Knight theories, as those theories rely on monsters still turning into dust when they die. However, there's no reason that can't still be the case. Just because the monsters have physical bodies now doesn't mean they die in the same way as humans. After all, wouldn't the angel want to leave monsters as untouched as possible? It had to give them physical bodies to replace their old ones, but it doesn't necessarily want to completely change what monsters are at their core. Monster culture relies on monsters turning into dust for their funeral rites, so in order to maintain their cultural identity, the angel would need to maintain that aspect of their biology. And since it has infinite power, it would be more than capable of designing their new physical bodies in such a way that they turn into dust upon death, just like they always had. Furthermore, if being a supernatural entity was core to who they are, like the ghosts being able to fly and fire elementals being on fire, then it was only fair that the angel designed their new physical bodies to be capable of reproducing these formerly magical effects. Honestly, it almost feels like cheating to just say the angel did it, as an entity having infinite power really does let them solve just about any plot hole. But this really is the most logical progression of my theory. However, my dear viewers, this is where things take a turn for the shocking. You see, this new revelation may seem rather simple, but it has gargantuan consequences, not only for Deltarune, but for Undertale as well. Of the many mysteries that were never solved in Undertale, one that has always stood out in my mind is the death of Sans. The main element of his death that baffled the community was the fact that Sans bleeds. At the time, the Undertale community really had no idea what to make of this. Did this mean Sans was human? That didn't make sense. There was no evidence in Undertale of any sort of process that could turn a human into a monster. So then maybe this isn't blood, and it's just ketchup. After all, we see Sans drink a bottle of ketchup at Grillby's. But this explanation doesn't work either, as it's explicitly stated that monster food turns into pure energy the moment it enters your body. They specifically clarify that only human food passes through the body, and there's no reason to think that Grillby's, a monster restaurant made to serve monsters, would serve human food. If it did, then this monster, who says they want to try human food someday, wouldn't make any sense, as they would already have that option. As such, if the ketchup turns into pure energy, then it can't be what's pouring out of Sans' chest. So, if it didn't make sense that Sans was a human, and it didn't make sense that Sans was bleeding ketchup, then what was the answer? Well, at the time, we had no answer. It just didn't make sense. As a result, we all collectively shrugged our shoulders and moved on. There was no way to know why Sans had blood. That is, until now. With the release of Deltarune, and with these 2 bits of Suzy lore, we can now conclude that the idea of a monster having blood is in fact possible. And with that revelation comes yet another revelation. If Undertale monsters don't bleed and Sans has blood, then the only logical conclusion is that Sans is not an Undertale monster. He is a Deltarune monster. Now, to be clear, it's well known that Sans is from another world at this point. The river person warns us about the man from another world. Sans has powers and abilities that no other Undertale character possesses. He laments about wanting to return to his home, and he even clarifies that he's not talking about the surface. It's pretty clear that, in all likelihood, Sans originates from the Deltarune reality. Presumably, he is going to flee to the Undertale reality once the roaring starts taking place. The machine hidden in his workshop is likely the machine he used to cross over from the Deltarune reality to the Undertale reality. The machine then broke down, stranding him in the Undertale world. Toby Fox even specifically describes Deltarune as a different world, which is suspiciously similar to how the river person describes Sans. Sans being from Deltarune explains why Sans is so powerful despite being the weakest monster by the standards of this world. That may also be why he can so easily dodge attacks just like Darkness, and this is definitely why he bleeds. Now, to be clear, all this stuff about Sans originating from Deltarune and fleeing to the Undertale reality is hardly an original theory. Plenty of people in the community have theorized that the Sans in Undertale and the Sans in Deltarune are the same person. I might be one of the few people to use him bleeding as proof that he's from Deltarune, but I doubt I'm even the first person to think of that. However, there's one big issue with this theory about Sans. One big issue that I have a rather unique solution to. And this, my dear viewers, is where I recommend you turn off this video if you don't want to be spoiled on yet another heartbreaking plot twist that Toby Fox has in store for us. This plot twist that I think I've discovered might just be the most depressing revelation of them all. Are you ready? Let's dive in. The big issue with Sans being from Deltarune is that Sans is not alone. Sans has his brother, Papyrus, and this character is the primary issue with this theory, as not only does Papyrus not bleed when you kill him, but he's also utterly incapable of keeping a secret. If Papyrus had fled the Deltarune reality to come live in the Undertale reality with Sans, then it is inevitable that he would spill the beans on that fact to everyone in the underground. It would be common knowledge by this point. As such, if he doesn't bleed, he never mentions being from another reality, and he's the brother of Sans, then doesn't that poke a hole in this theory? After all, Sans loves his brother more than anything in this world, so if he fled the Deltarune reality to come to Undertale, then surely he would have brought his brother with him, which means that Papyrus should have all the same attributes as Sans. And this, normally, is where the discussion on the Sans is from Deltarune theory dries up. Papyrus seems to thwart this theory entirely. Or so it seems. You see, the answer to the papyrus dilemma is actually rather simple. The river person literally spells it out to us. Beware the man from the other world. Not the men, not the brothers, the man. Singular. There's only one person to travel from Deltarune to Undertale, and that person is Sans. Here is how I believe the story played out. Once upon a time, back in the Deltarune reality, Sans and his brother Papyrus come face to face with the horror of the Roaring. They realize that this angel has trapped their world in a time loop, and that they have no chance of living a regular life if they don't find a way to break this cycle. However, the angel is literally a god. It has infinite power. How could they possibly stop it? They don't have enough time to collect human souls to try and compete with the angel, as by the time the brothers realize what's going on, it's too late. They're almost out of time. However, not all hope is lost. Sans, through some unknown circumstances, comes into contact with the laboratory of one W.D. Gaster. And in that lab, Sans discovers two things. First, he discovers some mysterious blueprints for horrifying machinery. And second, he discovers one of these machines has already been completed. A machine capable of traveling between timelines. This just might be the thing Sans needs to save the world. If he can travel to another timeline, acquire enough power, and then come back, then he could put a stop to this angel and end this horrible cycle once and for all. However, before he could execute this plan, tragedy strikes. At this point, the Roaring had already begun, and the whole world had been thrown into chaos. The earth was cracking, the sky was running black, and nightmarish titans now roamed the countryside. In such an apocalyptic scenario, it is inevitable that there would be casualties. It is inevitable that some people would die. And one of those poor victims was Papyrus. The one person Sans cared about more than anything was gone. All hope was lost. Or was it? Sans has a revelation. This angel planned to reset this reality. It would undo this apocalypse and restart everything. That means it was going to bring everyone who died during this roaring back to life. There might still be hope for Papyrus. All he had to do was flee this reality, get enough power to beat the angel, and then destroy the angel after it resurrects Papyrus. It was a long shot, but he had to go for it. If there was even the tiniest chance of bringing back his brother, then he had to try. But would he have enough time? The angel was gathering power, and soon it would reset everything. If only there was a way to distract this monster long enough for him to escape. At this point, three young people who we all know very well enter this story. When exactly they enter this story and how much they know about what's going on, I cannot say. Maybe they were present when Papyrus died, because you know Toby Fox would love to force us to watch that happen. And maybe they hear from Sans that he has a long-shot plan that might stop the Angel. Our three protagonists, haggard but still filled with courage, offer their services. They will go fight the Angel. They will be the distraction. They may not be gods, but they had gained a great deal of strength over the course of their journey and had overcome countless hardships. If anyone could slow down a god, it was them. Sans thanks them for their aid and parts ways with the trio. He rushes to his time machine as fast as he can and gets ready to flee this reality. And as he does this, the prophecy comes true. As three heroes standing at world's edge come face to face with their final foe. They cannot win. They know they can't, but they can buy time. Sans goes hurtling from this reality, but even with the aid of the Delta warriors, the Angel could only be slowed down so much, and before Sans can completely escape this world, the Angel begins the reset. Sans can feel his memories being wiped, even as the machine carries him away, and he desperately rebels against this. He needs to remember. He needs to remember what's at stake. He needs to remember his mission if he wants to save his brother. And so, scribbling on a postcard he had lying around, he drew a picture of the three heroes who had given him his chance to succeed. And he wrote two simple words on that picture. Don't forget. And so, Sans arrives in Undertale, a man from another world with unique powers, unique biology, and a plethora of blueprints for terrifying technology. However, tragically, his plan to save the Deltarune reality quickly falls apart. He soon realizes that the machine he used to jump between worlds was now irreparably broken. He tried seeking the aid of other scientists and built a friendship with Alphys, whose scribbles can be found on the blueprint. But sadly, even with her genius, they could not fix the machine. At this point, Sans loses hope. It doesn't matter how powerful he becomes or what allies he gains if he can't go back to his world. Looking at the blueprints, Alphys discovers one more machine that might provide the solution they both need. Alphys had been hired to find a way to use soul power to break the barrier trapping monsters underground, and one of the blueprints Sans brought with him seemed to provide the very thing she needed. It was called the Determination Extraction Machine. The monsters in this new Undertale reality had need of a god for their own purposes, so Sans agreed to help them in their goal. Maybe once Asgore became a god and freed the monsters from the underground, he might have the power to help Sans return to his world. As such, in order to help the monsters acquire the human souls they needed, Sans set up shop right outside the ruins as a sentry. He would be the first line of defense, and with his arsenal of horrific gaster technology, he would be more than capable of slaughtering any human who passed through. However, even though he played along with this plan, deep down, Sans understood the hopelessness of his situation. Even if Asgore became a god, it wouldn't help. The whole point of him fleeing to this reality was because it was beyond the reach of the Angel. If the angel couldn't reach Undertale, then Asgore, even as a god, would not be able to reach Deltarune. This realization left Sans in a lifelong depression. He had failed. He had failed his world, he had failed the Delta Warriors, and worst of all, he had failed his brother. If that wasn't tragic enough, he would soon discover that this reality was also being controlled by a being with power over time. An unknown anomaly had trapped Undertale in a time loop as well. He tried his best to stop this anomaly, which is why a significant portion of Flowey's resets were caused by Sans, but Sans soon realized the futility of all this, as the anomaly could just reset every time he killed it. Sans had fled his home world, abandoned his people, all in the name of finding help to free them from the Angel's time loop, only to find himself stuck in a different reality, once again trapped in a time loop and utterly incapable of helping these people either. He failed in Deltarune, and he failed in Undertale. The life of Sans is tragedy after tragedy after tragedy. The only thing that kept him going, and the only thing that brought any joy in his horrible, painful existence, was Papyrus. In this new world, this Undertale reality, there was an alternate version of his brother. And though it wasn't his original brother, it was the only thing Sans had anymore. And so, while thoroughly depressed and heartbroken, he put on a brave face. If he couldn't be there for his Papyrus, then perhaps it would be enough just to be there for this Papyrus. Then maybe life would still be worth living. And this is the version of Sans that we encounter when we enter the underground. A broken man who lost everything and is only holding on to any semblance of happiness by lingering around an alternate version of the only person he ever loved. You'd think the story would end here, but oh no, there's still another mystery to uncover. You see, there's one issue with all this, an issue that nobody has really acknowledged. If these games are separate realities in which we have duplicates of every single character, and Sans is originally from Deltarune, then where is the Undertale version of Sans? Where is Papyrus's original brother? And that, my thoroughly depressed viewers, is a question that I only have a partial answer for. The Undertale version of Sans is dead. I don't know how it happened or why it happened, and I don't know if Toby Fox will ever reveal the truth. But I know that he is dead. However, he's not just regular dead. Much like Gaster, he has also been shattered across space and time. He has been erased from this world. That's why nobody remembers there being two different versions of Sans. There's only the Deltarune Sans in their memories, as he was never erased. This is the final tragic detail of the Sans story. He came to this reality, realized that something was wrong because there was no alternate version of himself, and soon pieced together that something terrible had happened. He realized that the original Sans of this world was gone, and so the Deltarune Sans took his place. Why did he do that instead of just being upfront about his identity as a Sans from another world? Simple. He didn't want Papyrus to go through the same trauma that he had. The trauma of losing your brother and having no way to bring him back. And so, the final real mission of Sans' life was now clear. He couldn't let himself die. Not yet. He needed to be here for this Papyrus. He needed to be there to support him. It was the only thing he could really do to honor the memory of his original brother. But wait, there's one last plot twist to discuss. You see, not only was the Undertale Sans shattered across time and space, but you viewers watching at home have actually seen what the original Sans looks like, even if you didn't realize it. And no, I'm not talking about the Deltarune Sans. You've actually seen the Undertale Sans one time before now. Some of you have probably guessed precisely what I'm about to say. To put it simply, there's a very good reason that this sprite is labeled Mystery Man and not Gaster. This is all that's left of the Undertale Sans. A fractured fragment scattered across time and space. That's why Toby Fox wouldn't let this tarot card be sold in the merch store. It's because this idea of what Gaster is, with the black robe and holes in his hands, has never been canon. That's always just been what the fans think he looks like. Of course, if this mystery man isn't Gaster, then that raises the question, where is Gaster? What does Gaster look like? That's the thing about being shattered across time and space. Sometimes something can be staring you right in the face and you just don't realize it. Gaster is here too. You just have to have the right perspective. Two heads fused together at the neck. A horrifying visual. Of course, two monsters fusing together instead of dying isn't exactly a new concept in Undertale, now is it? As for how this happened, and what led to this version of Sans ending up like this, I will happily explain that in a later video. I hope you guys enjoyed today's theory. It was quite a doozy, wouldn't you say? Now, before you rush to Reddit and write up a 3-page essay about how arrogant and stupid I am, let me just say that all of this is just a theory. I'm fully aware that I could be wrong, and I would not be surprised if I am wrong. I feel quite good about this theory, as it seems to fit the tragic narrative that Toby Fox is writing, but I'm not so arrogant that I can't acknowledge my own fallibility. After all, in this very video, I acknowledged that I was in denial about Susie having blood, so even if I can be slow to admit it, I do acknowledge my logical shortcomings eventually. So try not to take all this too seriously. These theories are ultimately for fun, so if you're not having fun, then you're taking this the wrong way. With that disclaimer out of the way, I am quite excited to see what y'all think of my theory. It's the first time I've done a theory on Sans, so I hope it lives up to the hype. Did you like how I lured you in with a theory about monster blood, only to jump scare you with a horrible theory about Sans losing everyone and everything he cares about? My favorite part is the bit where we get to watch the Deltarune version of Papyrus die right before our eyes. I can't wait for Toby Fox to do that to us. Oh, man. Also, don't you love how the first 2 chapters of Deltarune have been nothing but silly fun and wacky hijinks, and yet all my theories are about how literally everyone is going to suffer horrific, life-ruining trauma? It's like watching a Three Stooges act and then going, wow, it's really gonna hurt when Curly dies at the end. Honestly, just saying that my vision of Deltarune's future is too dark is a pretty solid argument against these theories. It's unclear if Toby Fox is willing to write such an overwhelmingly depressing story. But hey, only time will tell. Oh, and before I forget, there was one extra detail regarding the Sans theory that I completely forgot to integrate into the main video, so I'll just tack it on here. When you kill Sans, one of the often overlooked and stranger elements of his death is that he dies off screen. Sans is the only enemy to do that. Why? Well, I think it's because Toby Fox knew we'd figure out Sans is from Deltarune, and he doesn't want to reveal just yet what happens when a Deltarune monster dies. After all, a lot of Deltarune's plot twists, at least in my theories, depend on monsters leaving dust behind when they die. So in order to keep us from realizing that monsters still work that way in Deltarune, he hid Sans' death from us. However, I would argue that Sans does still turn into dust when he dies, as the sound that plays when he dies is the same sound that plays when all monsters die, and that sound is labeled vaporize in the files. Furthermore, if Sans really did not disintegrate, then that would mean there should be a corpse, and yet there isn't. Even if you argue that Sans teleported away at the last second, he said he's going to Grillby's, so his corpse should be possible to find at Grillby's if that's really what happened, and as far as I'm aware, there's no such Sans corpse to be found. The simplest answer is that he turned to dust just like all the other monsters, and that further supports my idea that Deltarune monsters turn into dust when they die. Anyway, just thought I'd tack on that last little bit of theory crafting before I go. With all that discussed, I think it's time that I sign off. Like if you enjoyed the video, comment if you've got something to say, subscribe if you want to see more, and as always, have a fantastic day.